All right. Welcome, Oliver, on the Zoom. Good to see you. I finally got my I brought my phone extender from my office over here. This one actually I think it was oh the sticker came off, but I remember there was a gentleman named Albert Lilienfeld who attended all my classes back when I was in Connecticut. And I would always, like, every time I bring my phone to class for the Zoom, there'd be no obvious way to stand it up. And I used like a coffee cup holder and it was getting ridiculous. And he just like bought me this already. He's like, I'm donating the official phone stender. So I brought this along with me and it's, every time. Oh yeah. Or you got the built-in stender over there into your phone. All right. So our topic or series of topics we're going to talk about is we're going to talk about mikvah, money, and mysticism. I always like a good alliteration. Yes, I always like a good alliteration. So I always like a good alliteration. And just a heads up in general, I'll try to remember to especially for the people listening to YU Torah on this. So this gets recorded, goes on YU Torah. So some people just pop in, pop out of the classes that they like. So a lot of the material we're doing here is either already, I mean, I shouldn't be telling you this, it's already written up in my Unpacking the Igros series, or it will be written up, God willing, in the future in the Unpacking the Igros series. So if you want to see a sample of what I'm talking about, there are a few copies up there on Ramosha Feinstein Artificial Insemination. You could take a look at it, or you could just wait till we get up to in the actual cheer. What I will tell you is that because my editor is very good and likes to keep things nice and streamlined, at least I can promise you that there will be some goodies and some unedited takes that you get for coming to the class. So yeah, exactly. So if you want any of the hot takes or anything that didn't make it into the final product, you come here for my whether it's a good sense of humor or a bad sense of humor, you could decide, but you'll get that here. That's what we call the oral Torah Shabbat Peh. Okay. Which means that I have to always give my usual preface. These are just receipts, so I'm not making things up, but use them if you like, and if not, just listen to the oral Torah. All right, so the high holidays are upon us. Hinei Yom Adin, the day of judgment is upon us. And as rabbis, we don't just have Emas Adin of God, but we're also like, Emas Hatzibor of the congregation. So we're doubly anxious. So one of the big things that we'll be talking about that comes up in the high holidays is that even if you are, I guess, particularly for men, and particularly non-Hasidic men who aren't using the mikvah all year round, many men will still use it prior to Rosh Hashanah or at least prior to Yom Kippur. So what I thought would be interesting is we dedicate this year to talking about issues related to mikvahos, and then our follow-up shiur we'll talk a little bit more directly about Kabbalah, about mysticism, and I think it should work as a two-part shiur, God willing. But whenever I say it's a two-part shiur, it means it becomes a three-part shiur. So, but we only have 2 more sessions until we go on hiatus for the holiday break. So tonight and I think we have next week still. Yeah, we still got next week. No worries. All right, so mikvos. So I have a question. Wow, that is really loud. It's probably hot enough already anyway. Who here is on the Chevra Kadisha? Okay, excellent. We got a good representation. So first of all, thank you for your service. It's a job that gets done behind the scenes. People don't always know what's getting done. I got to participate in a tahara in the past, and you guys are doing God's work. So it's called it's called a chesed shlemes, the truest form of kindness. Now, I have a question. This I'm actually, I know the answer because I went to Kulik's and I got a tour of the place. Do you use a mikvah as part of the tahara process?
Like a regular one. We tried it at the very beginning.
Oh, you did try one?
Yeah, we couldn't do it. We didn't.
The old mikvah, you did it at the old mikvah?
Yeah, the old mikvah. We tried it with one person.
Wait, you brought some from the place?
I don't even remember how we did it, but we always dropped the person. We did it. It was just awful.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, but yeah.
So I have a question. What's the method that we use now? It's for nice.
Three pails of water.
3 pails of water, which comes to Tisha Kavin.
Yeah.
Right, to 9 kavin of water. Very good. Now I have a question. Wait, say that one more time. Actually, it is the best you can do, arguably. Here's the funny thing. If I were to tell you, if you could just construct everything, you had a limitless amount of money, resources, would it be more ideal to have a mikvah, or would it be more ideal to just the 3 pails of water, the tisha kavin of water? What do you think is more ideal?
Construct a Tahara room with a mikvah attached or something?
Let's say you could construct it and you could do whatever you want. Should a mikvah be part of the tahara process? What?
Should you like dip a corpse inside of the mikvah?
Well, it's a.
That's what you would do. I mean,
You're going with the buckets? Yeah, because you know it's a trick question. That's why. Because I set you up for that.
Yeah, I know that. I don't know if I would want to go into a mikvah after that.
Manhandling them into a mikvah.
You're saying kavod hames, the dignity of the deceased.
Yeah.
And that's an important thing that we take into consideration. Okay, because Abby figured out that I was setting you up for a trick question. Rav Moshe Feinstein has 3 tshuvos on the topic. One in 1972, the follow-up in 1975 in Elul. It's in Elul, by the way, so very, very apropos. Oh, and the other one also in Elul 1975 as a continuation. So how apropos that we're discussing it right now. So in the first tshuva, it's a very short one. And the question is, Eich lasos mikvah l'tvilas niftarim. So how should we make a mikvah for, those who are niftar and those who are having a tahara done? So this is written to the Vad Harabanim of Flatbush. Does anyone else know what other, even more major issue involved the Vad of Flatbush that asked the Shiloh for Moshe Feinstein? Very good, David. Yes, it's you're going to say it also? Or what were you thinking of? Okay, so yes, the Erev is, and don't worry, guys, we will be talking about the Manhattan.
There was an Arab in Brooklyn for a long.
But who went ahead and made the Erev? So this was a big debate between a lot of the Hasidic community and Litvish yeshiva community. So okay, don't worry, because we have a 3-part series on the Manhattan and Brooklyn Erevin. And there's Borough Park controversy, and then there's the there's a Flatbush, and there's the ancillary Borough Park controversy. We will get up to all these things, God willing, a good time. It might be a while, but it'll be a good time. So here, for the mikvah purposes, oh, you know what'd be good? Bob, you were trying to get me to do something for the Erev crew, right? Yeah. All right, maybe we do some sort of thing to honor our Erev people, right? We got a few Erev people over here, so maybe we'll dedicate those classes somehow. We'll think how to work that in. So he says, here's the funny thing, guys. Let's say you had a mikvah, right? Have you ever seen a place at a funeral chapel that does have a mikvah? Is it even a kosher mikvah? Kosher mikvah. It's not so easy to make a kosher mikvah, right?
No.
You deal with that day in and day out. Does anyone know what you need for a kosher mikvah? Number of you guys are involved in our mikvah here. This is pop quiz time. Memsa, very good. So Rabbi Wiener points out you need 40 of water. That's a lot of water that you need to put in over there. And he doesn't know what kind of water it needs to be.
And some of it has to be rainwater.
Very good. Was that the pipes?
Some of it has to be rainwater.
Yeah.
Right. So it can't be what we call mayim she'uvin. It cannot be drawn water. And so that means the mikvahs that they use in a lot of the funeral chapels do not actually abide by the standards of a kosher mikvah. Shakulo sha'uv. He says that it's all drawn water, which he says is fine for these purposes. But he says for a kosher mikvah, lotia zochlin, there can't be any cracks in there. The water can't be leaking out. But he says rather, this is a fulfillment of the minhag hachiyuv ba'atolas tes kavin. So one needs only 9 kavin of water, which you said for our purposes we measured out to 3 pails of water. How big are those pails? Yeah, they are big. So you know what the trick is? If you can't make it for the men, if you can't make it to the mikvah I'm not very emotional. I just have allergies. That's all. I have to take my Claritin. So if a man cannot go to the mikvah, you know what the next best option is? Very good. You just take a nice long shower. So guys, new chumrah, new stringency. take a very long shower on Erev Yom Kippur. And so you yeah, so don't anyone who's like pro-environmentalism or anything like that, just don't tell them about this one. So that's the first tshuva is a rather innocuous one for the most part. It's the second tshuva where things get particularly interesting. Oh, sorry.
If she can't get.
Very good. And you know why? I'll explain exactly why. And I'm so glad you asked that question. Because there's a real tefillah and there is a less real tefillah. For real tefillah, biblically mandated, thou shalt go to the mikvah, which a woman has a biblical mandate of when a woman's a nida, if she wants to become tahora, to become pure, she has to go to the mikvah. So, but here, this is called Tevilas Ezra. Ezra, many years later, came and basically said that if a man sees a seminal emission, then he should go and he should wash himself. But this isn't a biblically mandated use of the mikvah. Truth be told, if you're a man and you can't, I mean, there's been a number of years. I mean, I remember, sorry to get a little bit graphic, but I still remember as a kid being brought to the mikvah and being utterly traumatized because they didn't take, so for the women when they go, you take turns. At the men's mikvah, especially in like the frum areas, they're all there. It's so I'm still traumatized from that. So there's quite a good number of years that I didn't go to the mikvah because of that. And then what happened was when I was an intern at Young Israel Plainview some years back, I was leading davening for some of the davening there on the high holidays. And their minhag was that anyone who's a shiach tzibur, anyone who's leading any of the davening needs to go to the mikvah beforehand. So, but I booked this. They're a little bit better. I booked a slot, and it all worked. I mean, honestly, I don't know if they were like, I didn't have to come with an ID. You know, they weren't IDing me, but I like if they wanted me to, I was going to do it. So, so the truth is, though, we kind of think of mikvah as like a woman's mitzvah, and the reason for that is because nowadays, when a woman goes to the mikvah to become what we call tahora, to become, for lack of a better term, pure. There's really two implications. One is the marital implications of the husband and wife being intimate, but the second one, which we don't really think about today, and you know, a lot of Nida deals with, is just the general laws of spiritual purity and impurity, which, by the way, applied to men also but the things we don't have a temple nowadays. And because we don't have a temple nowadays, we're not really thinking about this idea of how I have to be tahor, I have to be pure in order so I can, you know, eat from an offering, so I could go on the Temple Mount. But by the way, if any of you ever have a chance to go on the Temple Mount, I'm not saying whether to or not to, but if you ever have the opportunity, men, women alike have to go to a proper mikvah to ascend. But what's interesting is because without the Beis HaMikdash, without the temple anymore, and so the only real biblical mandate of a mikvah nowadays is for a woman when after she menstruates, after she gets her period. So it's become the realm of women mostly. But I guess Hasidim were very progressive, and so they wanted to make sure that there was equality or something. So the Hasidic men go to the mikvah also now. What? Yeah, very good. Yes, yeah, thank you. That was a good point. So Gerim also, right? So when someone converts, so biblically, there's really three parts of the process. There's the bris milah for a man. There is the mikvah, man or woman have to go to the mikvah. And back in the good old days, you have to bring an offering as well. We don't have the offering anymore. Maybe it'll have to be brought when Mashiach comes. But so we have the bris for a man and mikvah for men and women. So socially, it's become very much the domain of women. But the truth is, back in the times of the temple, mikvah was fairly used for both genders. So it's interesting socially how that developed, actually. Okay, you know, it's actually, this is not on the source sheet, but I came by this recently. There is a tshuva in Igros Moshe. They wanted to basically build, it seemed like it was a home for young women. I'm not sure. It was either who are orphans with special needs. It was like a lot of different complications, and they wanted to know about building it near the women's mikvah. They found a good plot of land near the women's mikvah, and they were worried about women's privacy going to the mikvah. So here's the thing: the Ramah says that when a woman goes to the mikvah, it should be very discreet. But you want to know what? Rav Moshe Feinstein was bringing all of our good Igros Moshes tonight. He was asked, a husband and wife, they're eating at a Shabbos table. And the wife, so there's certain rules about when a woman's a nida. She's not supposed to hand something directly to her husband and vice versa. So, but they're either eating at a meal and she feels embarrassed that she can, and they're going to know I'm a nida. So Rav Moshe Feinstein says, whoop-de-doo, women menstruate. It's natural. No, but then he goes a step further. He says during the times of the temple, because of the laws of Tumah Tahara, of ritual purity and impurity, women actually had what were called big day nida. They wore separate clothing for when they were in their time of nida after menstruating. So I'm not saying it's like scarlet letter style necessarily, but basically people knew when a woman was a nida. So it only later developed that it became this very discreet thing. But then Rav Moshe Feinstein, that tshuva about building the orphanage near the mikvah, he says that the truth is there are other poskim who think that it's not a big deal. I mean, nowadays, in some communities where there's like a lot of women, people will see each other all the time because you go into that waiting room and she's in that waiting room, and then they I'm not sure exactly how it works logistically, but people will see each other at the mikvah. And then the beautiful part at the end of that tshuva is, I forget the precise formulation. He says, chas v'shalom, that we should be lenient on the dignity of these young orphans. Meaning he flips it on its head. Most people are looking at it from the perspective, which rightly so, about making sure the dignity of the women going to the mikvah. But he says that's true, but there's also the dignity of these young orphans who are not going to have a place to live and are going to be shoot out of the community. He says that's an important consideration as well. So I thought it was just remarkable how he looked at it from both sides. That's something you'll notice, by the way, in his Psak Halacha. One of the things that made Rav Moshe Feinstein unique, I'm not saying he's the only one who did this, but the human element is much more present in his psak, more so than we might see in other places. For instance, this is a whole separate shiur. We will get there soon, God willing, but bring a seeing eye dog to shul. So he was the one who, spoiler alert, he's the one who gave the psak, basically permitting a man who was blind to bring his seeing eye dog to shul. All the other rabbis basically had a fit over that, but he was the one who said yes because he understood that this man would never be able to come into daven otherwise. So that's a separate shiur. Anyway, back to our featured, right? Because remember last time what happened was I gave the whole shiur on civil marriage instead of the actual shiur I was supposed to give. I guess these are all interconnected. That's just how it works. Okay, so now for our main event. Notice the change in tone. So here we go. Next tshuva. This is O space for those looking inside. So nowadays, notice this. We're all assuming that ideally we're supposed to have a mikvah in the chapel, but he says no. In the 1970s, he's saying this is an innovation that chapels are now installing mikvah. Now, mikvahs do precede the 1970s, but the fact that in America, people were starting to install them in the chapels. So it used to be that, people, if you're the kind of guy who gets up to daven very early, vasikin every day, and you're going to daven slichos at midnight every single night, halachic midnight, and, you're makbid on Chalav Yisrael, and I don't know, insert whatever, stringency. So then you were stringent that you said, after I die, I want them to dip me in the mikvah. But then, this is like what happens like with kashrut standards sometimes. Like once it becomes a stringency for some, it eventually becomes a standard for all. Think about, again, this is another shiur we're going to do, yarmulkes in the workplace. Moshe Feinstein also had a flexible psak on that one for someone who might be fired. Same idea. He looks back at the Gemara, spoiler alert again, and he says, you know what? Wearing a yarmulke used to be what we call a midas chasidus. It used to be a pious act for a man to cover his head. But nowadays, it's become the standard for all Jewish men who are observant to cover their heads. So it's interesting how these things develop over time. So, and here's transliteration trivia for the night, my friends. Take a look in the parentheses over there. Does anyone know what word that is? Mayor, you figured it out. Tell us. Very good. Ding, 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 ding. A point to Mayor right there. Chapels. Do you see that, guys, in the parentheses? All right, so you see, there is some English on the sheet. Only it's transliterated with the Yiddish letters. So the chapels are now bonin mikvah modim she'atzmi yesh mikvah miyakrin harbe b'shvil ze od yoser atzas ames. But what's happening? You have to think about it from a business standpoint. It costs money to install mikvah. It costs money to maintain the mikvah. So what's going to happen? You pass it on to the consumer, as it always goes. But what's the problem with this? Shehu neged takanos Rabban Gamaliel. This goes against the ancient institution of Rabban Gamaliel. Now, what did Rabban Gamaliel say? Sha'amar, shetzarich liros lahozil otzasames below lahokir. The goal is, we have the plain wood casket and plain shrouds for everybody, regardless of who they are. This came from Rabban Gamaliel. The Gemara tells us people used to not be able to afford burials, so they would just leave the corpse of their loved one in the street, and then they would scatter. And he said, this is absurd. So what would he do? He said, I want to be buried in the most simple way possible. And he started a new trend or new takana, a new institution. And the goal is we try to keep burial expenses as minimal as possible. And so Ramosha Feinstein's saying is,
was becoming a race to the bottom because everybody was making these elaborate queries and
those house things, right?
mausoleums and everything else. So they wanted to put a stop to that because they wanted people to spend money on living people, not
exactly. Well, this is the point at the end of the article. What I wrote, I'll just tell it to you now. It's if we can make dying affordable, but how do we make Jewish living affordable? That's the bigger question. I'll tell you, we'll move to Allentown, right? That should be our pitch to our friends in New York.
so that's why he was also trying to move forward.
Right, very good, excellent point. Right, I mean, he could afford it, but he was making a point in principle to demonstrate to others. Excellent. So this building the mikvah. So here's the problem. You're going to say, oh, well, this is just for people who want the deluxe package. But eventually, the deluxe package becomes the standard package for everyone. Eventually, the Glock kosher becomes the standard kosher for everybody at that at that point. So this flies in the face of the basic underlying principles of Jewish burial, that it should be affordable, right? We should at least be able to afford to die. It's like, I know it's a little bit dark. I was looking on the St. Luke's has the MyChart app now. So you can plan your orthopedics appointment, your chiropractic appointment, and apparently you can plan your end of life appointment as well. It's like scary. They schedule everything these days. Anyway, so the next, sorry, it's a little bit dark. In the next paragraph, he points out as follows, and he says, wait a minute, guys, let's back up for a moment. Why would we forget about whether it's affordable or not affordable? What is even the point of dunking a corpse in the mikvah? It's already tummy.
Right.
A body is avi avos hatuma, the highest level of ritual impurity. But before we get to that, he says, Kiba etzim b'meisim chavshi, top of the next paragraph, in the underline. The dead are already free from mitzvos at that point, right? It says in Hatikva, liot am chavshi b'artzenu, that we should be a free nation in our land. So there's different kinds of freedom. So chavshi just means with no responsibility. I don't have to keep any. So I think some religious scientists tried to change it to liot am kachshi, to be a holy nation. So, but right, the Mesim are chavshi. They don't have to keep the mitzvahs anymore. The guy, it's game over. Whatever mitzvah points and avera points you racked up over here, it stabilizes now. It's stagnant. That's static at this point. So what is even putting him in the mikvah help him in the next world? And then he says, in the next bold section, Ki mikvu rak davar hamitaher, af below tshuva, ve'inu v'chaper af b'tshuva. The mikvah doesn't make any difference. Whether if I don't do tshuva, going to the mikvah is not going to make me a holier person. So this is like tashlich. Tashlich is a great excuse for a nice social event and everything. But in the end of the day, the real way to get rid of our sins, to expiate them, is to do tshuva. And so Tashlich might be a nice symbolic thing. It's in the Maharil. I mean, it goes back to somewhat medieval times in Ashkenaz minhag, but that's not the real way to do it. It's a nice additional thing to do. It's people are born Rosh Hashanah afternoon, so we do Tashlich. Wonderful. Okay, I'm sorry, that was a little bit irreverent. But he says, and also if I do tshuva, I don't need it, and if I don't do tshuva, I also don't need it. It doesn't actually help in that regard. And then he says that he quotes a sefer Ma'avar Yabok, which has all these very interesting kind of like minhagim and prayers for those who are sick and dying. He writes, "Ki yesh lezeh v'alei tamim gedol masher gadol misichlenu v'enu roshin l'hayir b'zeh." There's all sorts of interesting Kabbalistic things out there, but here's the kicker. If you look at the last paragraph, he writes the following. Now, here's what I might say to myself. There's an ancient custom of using the 9 kavod of water, which we use as our big 3 pails of water. We translate into that. So I might think to myself, well, if those 3 buckets of water somehow help this guy, it stands to reason dunking in the mikvah is a step up. So can I just, take out my thumb over here and say, Kal v'chomer, a fortiorai. I never got a good translation of Kal v'chomer into English. I'm sorry. But basically, certainly, if 9 kavod of 3 pails of water helps this guy, whatever it does mystically, certainly dunking him in a mikvah ought to do something, right? But he says, this isn't halacha. Ein lomdim mitisha kavin, shekol shekei b'mikvah adif, de ein lomdim inyanim elu de kabbalah mikavah chomer. This is the realm of Kabbalah. This is the realm of mysticism. Mysticism does not operate on the same principles as halacha. Halacha operates on principles of logic. Kabbalah doesn't make sense to us in the first place, essentially. So you can't start making kal v'chomers because we don't know how 9 kavod of water even helps the guy to begin with. So how can I start going ahead and say, if pouring water on him helps him, certainly dunking him into the water, immersing him in water is going to help. I don't even know how the pails of water help him to begin with. Yeah.
So is the whole issue of tahara, is that minat Torah or where is it from?
Right. So a lot of the minhagim get developed over the ages. The general ideas of, taking care of the mace already go very far back in the times of the Mishnah and Talmud, different kind, but a lot of the, kind of subtleties and minhagim get developed as we move along. It'd be very interesting to kind of do like a study of like different Chaver Kadishas and like how things vary. But, you could definitely look at the back of the Gesher Chaim. Anyone familiar with the Sefer, Gesher Chaim? Other than Rabbi Wiener. So the Gesher Chaim is written by Rav Michal Tukachinsky. It was worth coming tonight just to find out who he is. So anyone ever go on my Zvanim on the fast day and want to figure out what time the fast ends? It's one of my favorite ones. So you ever notice the different times that are offered there? So what's it say? Like, who are the names? So as our good friend Ramosha Feinstein over there, there are 2 different times listed. The next tshuvas we do when we get back from break, from our hiatus, will be Ramosha Feinstein on Zmanim. Because I was calculating the Shul Zmanim, and I figured, you know what, I'm calculating the Shul Zmanim, now is the time to make sure I got everything done properly. So when I took my Shabbos off, my sabbatical, if you will, so we went up to the Holy Land of upstate of the Poconos. So we went there, and it was beautiful. Actually, it was like this nice, like this camp called Camp Machne Torah Chesed, and that nice like yeshiva sheminyan took like 3 hours for Shabbos morning davening. But I was thrilled because I just had like my stack of svarim, my reading material, and I could just go through everything that I wanted at that point. So I was able to basically like read through all this material. Anyway, I realize I'm getting a lot off track over here. So let me what was that?
When you were talking about the different minhagim and in Tahara.
Yeah.
We had, when we were first getting started, there was someone who was so scrupulous that it would have been a 20-hour thing. And we finally, at that time it was Rabbi Horowitz, we finally backed him to the wall and said, what is custom and what is thing? And basically he said, you wash the body, you pour the water, and you put the shrouds on.
Krichim,
Everything else is community
Exact-
custom.
Yeah, essentially, I mean, you clean them off. You're right, exactly. So anyway, so right, so let's get to it. So when I was there and I had the 3-hour davening, I got to read up like an Ola Zmanim literature that I wanted to. I was able to together to Moshe Feinstein on Zmanim Shir. It's on my computer right now. I'm still trying to like finish putting the sheet together. But anyway, that brings me to Ramichal Tukachinsky. He's the other name that's on there. So Ramichal Tukachinsky, it was a specialist in Zmanim, in the laws of timing in halacha, and also his most well-known work is Gesher HaChaim, which is pretty much the contemporary authoritative work on the laws of mourning. But I always say, you can't rely on Rav Tukachinsky's time unless you know who Rav Tukachinsky is. So now you all know who he is, so now you can rely on his earlier time. But Rav Moshe Feinstein, in his big tshuva, I think it's Orech Chaim Chelik Daled Samach Beis, somewhere around there. So that's where he has his times as well. So we'll go through that in good time. I will try to make Zman as fun as I can. I didn't think I would enjoy it. I thought it would just be very technical, but then I found some really juicy tidbits in there. I'll give you one example. There's one tshuva where he talks about someone came on Ellis Island. And he said, I looked at the sun and I saw when it set, and I don't think it fits with your Luach, Rabbi Feinstein, with your calculation. So I thought it was like really cool. It's like an immigrant story of a guy on Ellis Island. And most people are just sitting around, like thinking about, what am I going to do? I just got to a new country. They're all worried, where am I going to live? How am I going to make a living? And like this guy just watching the sunset, and he's thinking about, what's the time for Shkia? What's the time for when nightfall is? And like that's what he was thinking about when he popped onto Ellis Island, Wow, that's like the real halachic man over there. So anyway, at the end of this tshuva, just to wrap up, he says, V'prat, Shador Zelo Adam Midoros HaKodmim, Sheyigedom Tovim, who are we to have, the gumption or the arrogance to say that we're better than our bubbies and zadis from Europe, who came before us. They didn't need a mikvah when they died. Why do we think that we're better than them, that we need a mikvah when we die, right? He's saying is not only, so here's what the interesting thing is. We all walk into this year, admittedly, before I learned this, I had the same assumption that ideally you do the mikvah, and if not, you could suffice with just the pails. Moshe Feinstein flips it on its head. He says, no, we should not be using the mikvah. You're going to turn this new standard and make it unaffordable, which goes against the most core basic principles of the laws of Aveos, laws of burial and mourning. Number two, he says, we don't even know if we're accomplishing anything. It's not even a kosher mikvah. It's a dead body. You can't actually purify a dead body. A dead body is as ritually impure as it gets. And then how can I even start using logic when it comes to Kabbalah? We don't even get how Kabbalah works in the first place. So that's the main shuv over here. But just to drive the point home, if you go to page 2, in the follow-up shuva, in the bolded section over there, he says, Shari kavanasam lasus mizeh ravachim sheyaz al tzasakvura. So until now, in the second shuva we saw, it sounded like the increase in profit was incidental, right? So like if there's tariffs, then you have to pass it along the additional amount to the consumer. That's how economics works. But here he says, it sounds almost a little bit more skeptical or cynical. He says, no, the chapels are deliberately kavanasam. Their intention is to install the mikvos so they can increase their profit margins. So he said it's like almost more insidious. And so that actually I thought was a really interesting point when I saw that in the follow-up shuva. And then finally, at the end, I just thought it was important. He signs off, Akose v'chose l'man ha'emes v'kavod ha'mesim kadin, Moshe Feinstein. So he signs off the tshuva saying, and I sign this according to the truth and dignity of all who are deceased according to the law. So he's very firm on this. So this is one of many instances that we will see in our journey through Igros Moshe, where I guess you could almost call him a populist posek. One of the reasons I think there was a question that a few of you have raised, which is what was so important about Moshe Feinstein. As will be evident throughout the tshuvos we see, he takes into consideration more so than others, I would say, concerns for the common person, for the affordability of Jewish life, for the dignity of being able to live Jewish. We will see this throughout many of the shiurim that we do. Now, we got 7 minutes left, and I want to share with you a little bit more about Ramosha Feinstein and Mikvos. These were the main shuvos. But let me just share with you a few interesting ancillary things. Once I was kind of, looking up Igros Moshe and issues related to Mikvos, I found a few other cool things. So remember before we were talking about women going to the mikveh, right? So let's back up in the life cycle, right? We just jumped all the way to end of life or past life. Let's now talk about women going to mikveh, which we were discussing earlier. So here, this is a rough one. Let me pose the scenario to you, and you tell me what you think. I'll read it for you. I'll just tell it to you, actually. If you had to choose between having a mikveh or a day school, which would you choose? Okay, well, what, did I hear any D? What? Lower Abbey? You're not choosing?
Yeah.
Yeah.
There. Day school?
No,
Okay, my friend. So mikveh people, make your case.
no,
Well, you're
no,
not gonna
mikveh,
have
no,
any
no,
kids for
mikveh,
the-
no kids.
No kids. No mikveh, no kids. Good point. All right, day school people, make your case.
No education, assimilation.
Ooh, that sounded good. That's like a tagline. No education. We should put that like on the. We should put that like the JDS tagline. No education simulation. Anyone taking notes over here? Well, so guess what? Without reading through the entire tshuva, this is exactly what he is weighing. So he says, on the one hand, we're dealing with an Isser Karis, a woman and a man who get together. She doesn't go to the mikvah. We're dealing with a very serious biblical penalty here. On the other hand, he writes, V'shil laila achas b'af shtei leilos ein lacha shel shomrei Torah sheyichash be'isar chamer d'kari. So here's the thing. This is in Brunswick, New Jersey. Not too far from us, right?
Is there a Brunswick? I thought it was just New Brunswick.
Yeah, it just says Brunswick, but I assume that's what it's referring to. It says, Harav Agon Moreno Rav Pesach Raymond. Pesach Raymond?
Oh, that's Mariah. She lives in the Highland Park.
It's a Raymond.
Raymond was the principal.
It says Harav de Brunswick.
Yeah,
Says it.
right. Yeah, that's-
Was he earlier? So this relates because he says, even if you don't have a mikvah in your town, but he says, Lo rachuk me'ir kahad de Elizabeth. She's smucha le Brunswick. But Elizabeth, New Jersey is near Brunswick, New Jersey. So he says, it's a great question, but practically speaking, there's a mikvah in the town right over. Now he says it's possible, let's say you have a 3-day, what we call 3-day Yontif, where Shabbos goes into Yontif and another day of Yontif. So he says, if there's we think the people who are Shomer Torah mitzvos, who are observant, you wait 12 days, you could wait like a couple more days if it falls out that way, you'll survive. But he says if push comes to shove, this is fascinating, toward the bottom, the machashashos shovin, let's say, right, we have a standstill, it's an impasse. Hayeshiva kadim, the yeshiva comes first, mishum shachashasha yismatu al talmidim, because the concern that the students will not be able to go to yeshiva, hu chashasha yavru al kol mitzvos haTorah chamuras beyoser, kmo Shabbos van kfira chaser shalom. B'Hashem Torah shazay yishlach yoser. He says nida is one mitzvah, but if the kids don't get a Jewish education, they're not going to keep any of the 613 mitzvos.
They won't go to the mikvah.
Right. They'll never have a chance to go to mikvah. He says, Lo rak al ilu hayeladim. It doesn't just apply to these children, like gam ledoros habayim. But what about on future generations of kids as well? It's like, we'll get to this in our Medrash Rabbah class, but when God comes to Cain and says, Demei achicha, the blood in plural blood, so I guess of your brother is crying out to me from the earth. So why is it in plural? So the Medrash Rabbah, Bereshis Rabbah says, it's because you killed him and you killed all of his posterity that he could have had. So you killed all future generations. So no education, assimilation. This is good. Okay. Yeah.
Mariah in the state, there.
Wow.
I remember what directors there. but it was very nice, and they named it after him, so now it's called Rabbi Pesach Range.
Right. Ah, very good. So I guess this was just the date was what is this? 1969. This is 1969. Summer of 69.
Time, place, people. One of the factors in this tshuva is that there's a mikvah
Close by.
not that far away.
Exactly.
It's beyond walking distance, but it's not that far away.
100%.
If this were the middle of Nevada, let's say, and the question were, do we build a mikvah, or do we build a school?
Yep.
And it might have been-
Absolutely. Rabbi Wiener is bringing up an important point, which is, and Ramosha Feinstein writes this in I believe in the introduction to Igros Moshe, which I'm realizing it probably would be worthwhile if we read through the introduction together at some point. That probably would be helpful. We'll do that at some point. And then he writes it in two subsequent responsa that every single tshuva, virtually all of them, are written for specific circumstances. And he was opposed to people writing short summaries of his tshuvas, because what would happen is that someone who is not well versed in the considerations will erroneously extrapolate it to a different scenario, maybe not understanding that these fine details. Excellent.
Frailties.
Confession is later on.
Oh, that's the Shabbat Shuvah drasha we're talking about, confession, actually. Yeah.
We came to shul knowing nothing. And then I would say, I know less than nothing, because I didn't care that I knew. So I started reading and reading and reading, and I read that the first thing, reading the wrong books is what I'm reading. The first thing a community must do is build a mikvah.
Well, that's always.
Right.
That's always.
Right. You're correct. Mikvah is one of the essentials, not pizza shops. Which pizza and sushi according to some places. Yeah.
So that's the discussion, but we've all heard that.
Yeah.
Most of us have heard that.
Yeah.
Yeah. But you wouldn't be able to get ready to move into the mikvah, to the community if they can.
Okay, take Allentown. What's more important here? That
Yeah.
we're just mikvah nearby.
But you won't
There's
get,
no mikvah.
but you won't be able to get ready to move into the community if there's no mikvah.
Yeah, people actually come here to use the mikvah.
Yeah, right, that's true.
The schools.
Mhm.
You could do it in your house. But when we were looking to move here, I moved. Yeah. So that's, you're right. You're not wrong.
Yes.
You're not wrong.
As we say, two Jews, three opinions. So always a good principle. Just to wrap, you know what? I'm on overtime. Am I overtime?
No,
We're still here.
I've been worse. Okay, so all right. If you need to go, you need to go. I just want to wrap up the mikvah section. That way we can jump into mysticism next time. All right, very briefly. One other case over here was right. So to Rabbi Wiener's point, if you look at the page number 3, there's another tshuva about a community that had an issue, and they wanted to basically, I think they were selling the mikvah. They were going to make a new one, but there wouldn't be a mikvah in the interim. And it sounds like they did not have the luxury of another one that was nearby. So here's where the circumstances change. So in such a case, he writes, the multitude of our sins, that if there is no kosher mikvah in the area, big no. You cannot sell the mikvah, you cannot destroy the mikvah, you can't do anything. There always has to be a standing mikvah in the community. So in the previous tshuva, they had the luxury of a mikvah being a town over. So maybe on a Shabbos and holiday, people couldn't make use of it, but in general, it was accessible. But I want to contrast this to your point about, in general, if there isn't going to be a mikvah in the community, that's not tenable. That's untenable. There has to be a mikvah in the community. So, and he says, from the same language as chametz. We should not allow it to leaven, even for one moment. So this is something that we got to jump on right away. If there is no mikvah that's accessible, now in the community, again, doesn't have to necessarily mean always literally within 2-minute walking distance of my house, but it means accessible to the community, then there's an inherent failing in the community. So that's important. Now here's the interesting part. Oh, Judy, sorry. No. You always have permission to engage directly. Mhm. Yeah, yeah. That's a kosher mikvah generally. Yeah, Ocean's the world's biggest mikvah. That's exactly. So very good. Yes, just be careful. That's all. Okay.
Great in December.
Oh yes, polar plungers or something. So now, my friends, if you look at Osvav here, there's a book here. It's not really a book. It's part of Igros Moshe called Man Malchi Rabbanan. It is a 32 or 34 page Hebrew biography written by the family in the beginning of the 8th volume of Igros Moshe. Over several Shabbos afternoons, I read through it. And I put bookmark after bookmark after bookmark after bookmark and annotation after annotation and noting all the different themes in it. So then I wrote next to different sections, mikvah, mikvah, mikvah. So when eventually I made a shir on mikvahs, I was able to pull all the relevant sections on mikvah from the biography. So to make a long story short, Ramosha Feinstein in his later years before they fled Russia, he was living under communist Russia. The communist regime was not too kind to the Jews, to say the least. And in fact, they imposed a rabbi tax. And if a community cannot pay the rabbi tax, then they would not have a rabbi. As you can imagine, that was just basically a backward way of kicking out all the rabbis from their positions. But in Luban, where Rav Moshe Feinstein was serving, they managed to keep it going for quite a while until eventually that became untenable. So what they did is that they said, we don't like all these mikvos. They're not healthy for people. They're not hygienic. They gave different pretexts. So they turned them all into public swimming pools for men and women. But Rav Moshe, they managed to intercede with one of the members of the municipality, and they finagled a way to make one of these now swimming pools still kosher to be a mikvah, as long as you do enough, backflips and halachic somersaults to make it happen. So, and in fact, Rav Moshe Feinstein wrote 2 tshuvos on it, which are in the first volume of Yoreh Deah. Now, here's what's interesting. Even though it was the only kosher mikvah within the whole entire province, I guess, if people are coming from far and wide to use it, Rav Moshe Feinstein's wife did go to the mikvah just so other women would be comfortable. But they did not personally want to rely on it. So Shein Pirshu Zemizo Lameshech Chamesh Shanim. They were not together with each other for 5 years. Ad Shilhi Tafresh Sadi Vav Kasher Azu Es Russia. So until they left Russia and came to America, they basically for the last 5 years were not together as husband and wife. So on the one hand, she went to the mikveh actually, so that way other women were comfortable going. But because they just always, and this is a thing you'll notice in Rav Moshe, he believed very strongly in minhag, that one follows a custom that cannot easily be undone. So since they were accustomed to a higher standard, they did not want to compromise that. So for 5 years, apparently they were not together until they came to America, per the biography in the Igros Moshe, which is from family members. So, I mean, I guess, yeah. So take it as is. Okay, but however, when students of Rav Moshe came and said, could they rely on it? They were adamant that the students should be making use of the mikvah. Okay, last. No. Okay. All right. Now, last thing, we're talking about women going to mikvah. What about men going to the mikvah? So did Rav Moshe Feinstein go to the mikvah? So bring in some other books over here. The book Darchei Moshe, which is a compilation of stories of Moshe Feinstein based on the Parsha. Then there's a book called Mysticism Moshe, which is a little pamphlet that my Rebbe, Rev Tendler, gave to me. So at most family simchas, people put out benchers. But when you're part of the Feinstein family and very scholarly, you put out pamphlets of your novel Torah ideas. So instead, I don't know if in addition or in lieu of benchers. So this is a pamphlet that he gave me, which had customs of Rav Moshe Feinstein. So it says in Darchei Moshe that Moshe Feinstein would go to the mikvah. He would go on Erev Shavuos, on Erev Shavuos, before Shavuos, and he would go in there 51 times. I believe 49 days of Sfiras Omer, and then I guess 50 and 51 for Shavuos, and I think second day Shavuos. And then it says in the work Maseh Moshe, under the heading Toivling in a Mikvah, Rav Moshe was makbid. He was particular about going to a mikvah kashera, kosher. There's more Hebrew in here than there is English, ironically. Before the holiday, I'll try to translate. Before the holidays, Pesach, Shavuos, Sukkot, and Hoshana Rabbah. Roja felt that the immersions before the holidays were in commemoration of the temple, and therefore one had to be in an actual kosher mikvah. So Ramosha finds he didn't necessarily believe that it was going to make everyone as pure as they might want to be, but he believed actually it was due to the commemorating that when we would go up during the three pilgrimage holidays, the Shalosh Regalim, I forget, is that what you call them in English? Three pilgrimage holidays, the Shalosh Regalim. So one has to go to the mikvah before ascending to the temple. Rav Moshe would toivel 3 times, though he said that once would be sufficient. Rav Moshe would also go to the mikvah on Erev Rosh Hashanah and Erev Yom Kippur, and was not particular that it was a kosher mikvah at these times. On Erev Yom Kippur and Hoshana Rabbah, he would toivel 39 times, symbolically representing Malchus. So we learn Malchus that certain sins carry 39 lashes. So he dunked 39 times, corresponding to 39 lashes. But unlike Hasidim, he didn't toivel every day or even before Shabbos. So here's the thing: even though Ramosha finds he did go to the mikveh personally on some occasions, this brings us back to our first point, right? We were asking why is a non-kosher mikvah okay sometimes, but for women we need a kosher mikvah. So it depends. Are we doing is it a real biblically mandated immersion or is it not? So here's the thing. One is forbidden from taking a hot shower on Shabbos. I'm sorry if this is news or something, but in general, so for 2 reasons. One is you're not allowed to heat up hot water on Shabbos. That's cooking. But even if the hot water is prepared before Shabbos, there is a gezerah, a rabbinical restriction called gezeras balanim, that what would happen is the bathhouse owners, they would claim to heat up the water before Shabbos, but then they would actually heat up the water on Shabbos. So the rabbi said, take a shower Erev Shabbos, no more baths on Shabbos, because people were heating it up on Shabbos itself. However, you might ask, wait a minute, if a woman needs to go to the mikvah on Friday night, it's the middle of December, you're going to tell me she has to polar plunge into this freezing cold ice water? Can't they heat up the mikvah? Right? I presume we have the mikvah heated.
It's constantly heated.
Constantly heated. All right. So the question is, how's she allowed to use it? So the answer is, the rabbis went. It's the rabbis giveth, the rabbis taketh away. So as my mentor Rabbi Eli Weissman always liked to say, right? So basically, the same rabbis who instituted the restriction of bathing in hot water on Shabbos were the same rabbis who carved out an exception for a tvila shel mitzvah, for not immersion for enjoyment, but immersion for mitzvah purpose. Here's the question: a woman going to the mikvah, that's a mitzvah. What if I want to go to the mikvah on Shabbos?
It's already hot.
No, but even if it's already hot, I'm not allowed to. So he says, "Gam litvol lekeriel tosefes kedusha shnogin lahakab l'shabbat sonin aser b'cham." It's forbidden for a man to do it because for a man to go to the mikvah is not. It's a nice thing to do, but it's not biblically mandated. He's not chayiv to go to the mikvah on Erev Shabbos. Like I said, look, people do all sorts of things for kicks. Some people like to play pickleball. Some people like to go for a jog. Some people like to go to the movies. I mean, there's worse things you could do with your time than going to the mikvah on Erev Shabbos. But it's not a mitzvah the same way a woman going to the mikvah for nida is actually a mitzvah, which is why if a woman goes to the mikvah on Shabbos, she can use the water that's heated before Shabbos. But he held that if a man was going to go, it would be forbidden.
So even the fact that we keep it at a constant, steady temperature, a man can't use it on Shabbos. So
that's correct. Now Hasidim think otherwise, because as we will see next time when we talk about mysticism, the next time what we're going to talk about is the role or lack thereof of mysticism in the halachic process. Are halakha and Kabbalah two separate systems, or do they actually play off one another? You could already get a sense of where Moshe Feinstein's going, but when we contrast him with the Hasidic and Sephardic world, we're going to see some interesting butting of heads next time. So we'll
Love to hear that.
a whole shear. But the brief answer is, yeah. The brief answer is according to my humble opinion, I think it's not only okay to take a hot shower on Yom Tov, but here's the thing: once you say that it's permissible, then it becomes obligatory because of kavod habrius, human dignity. So once you're allowed to take a shower, then you have to take a shower. Otherwise, it's offensive to everyone else around you sitting on your pew in shul. So once it becomes permissible, it then jumps to being obligatory. So it's either forbidden or it's obligatory. It's one or the other, guys. But that's a whole separate year. We'll get to that. All right, shkayach, everybody.
Thank you.